This week's episode of Astonishing Legends is brought to you in part by Squarespace, Harrys.com, and the Great Courses Plus.
And we're back.
Oh, yeah, you still working on that Michigan accent?
Still got it. Came with me. Yeah, came back with me.
We are back, and we owe a debt of gratitude to every single one of you that's listening to this show right now.
On October 2nd of 2014, we posted our first episode of this show, having no idea if anyone would find the things that we found interesting worth listening to us prattle on about. Well, 2.5 years and 71 episodes later, we've passed 20 million total downloads, and frankly, we're amazed we've gotten this far.
Yeah, by the way, whatever you do, please don't go back to the first episode.
Well, no, that's fine. You can go back to the early ones. There's just a lot more of what annoys you about our show. Well, we'd like to think that we've evolved some since those early shows. And the funny thing is that the first episode wasn't even really technically our first show.
Oh, here comes some astonishing trivia.
Exactly. Our 8th show was actually the first recording session we ever had.
That's right.
And it's one of the more polarizing topics because it's a story that people either you got it and you liked it, or you didn't get it and you didn't care for it.
Yeah.
Well, it's called The Devil in the Diner.
Yeah, and that show, even though some people didn't get it, it actually had a lot of legs because the Fireside Mystery Theater, which is a podcast that has been supporting us a long time, and we've been supporting them in turn. They do radio drama performances.
Great performers on stage.
Yeah, very cool. And they adapted Devil in the Diner to a performance that they did on stage in Manhattan, in New York City. And then also some friends of mine that I used to work with who are both directors and editors and producers themselves, Zeke O'Donnell and Peter Sabatino, produced a handmade animated digital short. I mean, they used some After Effects and other stuff like that. That's very cool, and you can still see to this day on our YouTube channel.
Both are very cool and creative interpretations of that story. So check them out.
Yeah, whether you liked the story or not, which we both did. And that was an interview with Paula Pell, who's a comedy writer, television and film comedy writer, very accomplished. And we had done it much earlier that year, 2014. But I was nervous about it because we were so lucky to get her on the show. I was reluctant to make it our very first episode because I knew we still didn't really know what we were doing. And we wound up waiting and making it our 8th episode after we had kind of gotten our sea legs there.
Just in time for the giant squid to attack.
Oh, back off that metaphor, dude.
Well, it's a little late for that now, isn't it?
All right. The point is...
Well, what is your point?
The point is we just wanted to say thank you so very much for supporting the show, and especially supporting our sponsors too, because that, after all, is what actually keeps the lights on around here.
Yes, indeed it does. And now that we've got our foot in the door of the podcasting world, we need to push it open a little bit wider.
I feel like maybe that's breaking and entering.
Again, that's a metaphor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, podcasting, as anyone can tell you, is developing explosively. It's exponential here. And the major players are getting in the game. And before long, it'll be hard for indie shows like Astonishing Legends to even get off the ground, as they're going to be crowded out by well-funded networks with celebrity hosts and tons of dough to spend on marketing, which will make it impossible for an independent show like ours to even get noticed in the first place.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, that's already happening. We feel, however, that we've got room to grow, and you guys are our biggest asset. Our marketing budget is $0.00. We've come this far on word of mouth, and we don't want to stop here. We want to continue to get the word out so we can someday maybe even branch out into fostering new shows or creating some kind of network of our own to help other indie podcasters get off the ground. It's crazy to us that according to the vaunted Edison Research Company, over half the people, in the United States anyway, have never heard a podcast. So go forth. Teach them. Bring them to the light.
You're getting all culty there. Everyone knows you're supposed to stay away from the light, Carol Ann.
All right, it's a metaphor first.
Well, touche then.
All right. Anyway, you're right. I'm being long-winded. We need more earballs. So please tell your friends and family about us, and don't stop with just telling them about us. Show them how to listen and how to subscribe to us. There's a ton of platforms out there now, but it's still not as easy as it should be, and a lot of people need a little help figuring it out.
That they do, and we're anxious to welcome them to the fold because, after all, as far as we're concerned, we're just getting started.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Where there is mystery, it is generally suspected there must also be evil. Lord Byron.
Join us tonight as we take a look at the town that disappeared, leaving little more behind than a haunted cemetery and tales of a witch's curse. Pere Cheney, Michigan. When we were invited to Detroit a few weeks ago, we were asked to come speak about a Michigan legend, or specifically a Michigan folkloric tale.
Yeah, did we tell you about that?
Yeah,
we
did. We mentioned it
announce
last week.
several
Yeah,
hundred times?
I know. But we considered quite a few.
Yeah.
And Michigan is rich with them. There's the Michigan Dogman, the Zug Island Hum, Le Nain Rouge,
Le Nain Rouge, yes.
the Witch's Chair.
That's at the Brookside Cemetery in Tecumseh, and
Yes.
it dates all the way back to 1853.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. It's also the official birthplace of Paul Bunyan.
That is right, yes,
Yeah.
and his ox Babe.
But however, there was one story in particular that caught our eye after it was brought to our attention by paranormal researcher, investigator, and author of nonfiction and fiction books about the paranormal, Debbie Chestnut.
That's right.
Her most recent book, by the way, is called Something Wicked, A Ghost Hunter Explores Negative Spirits, and it deals with dark entities, demons, and exorcisms. And she's also working on a new book as we record this.
Yeah, I believe she's actually wrapping that one up this week. Debbie indirectly was involved with the sludge entity. So she's the real deal.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and that's how we got to know her. And
exactly.
she's been very helpful to us over the past few months, especially with regard to prepping for our Detroit show. And since then, we've become friends.
Yeah. Well, she mentioned several topics, but the one I think that immediately jumped out at us, as we said, is Pere Cheney, because it had all the elements of a great haunted cemetery story.
Yes, Pere Cheney is a little town right in the middle of what Michigan residents call the mitten.
Yeah,
it's
like your hand, right? And like if you ask them where they're from in Michigan, they'll hold up their hand.
Yeah, everybody holds up their hand,
right.
And then if they're in the Upper Peninsula, they hold their other hand above and say, right here. There's a lot of pointing.
The UP, yes.
The thing about Pere Cheney is you can't even find it on a lot of maps these days.
No, it helps to have the GPS coordinates because
Yeah.
it's a town that's been erased.
There's very little left of it except for some old train tracks, and it vanished almost entirely by 1917, just 44 years after it had been founded in the first place.
So it is hard to find, but you can get there. It's visible, and it has daytime hours.
Yes, but it's a little bit in the middle of nowhere. It's halfway between the towns of Grayling and Roscommon. And all that's left, as we said a few minutes ago, were some old train tracks from the Jackson, Lansing, and Saginaw Railroad, which was built in 1871 and was heading towards Mackinac City.
Right. The town was established. Actually, it was kind of a rail stop to begin with. In 1873, when George M. Cheney received a land grant from the Michigan Central Railroad to establish a stop along that rail line that had just been built between the towns of Gaylord and Jackson, because you need to stop for supplies and drop things off. And the lumber business was booming then.
That's right. And Pere, as in Pere Cheney, means father in French. And as you know, Michigan's early history is closely connected to French colonial occupation. So somehow, out of that French influence, we got Pere Cheney, or the town's Papa Cheney.
Yes, the founder. Well, you remember our Parashatia from our Krampus Christmas show?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of the early shows,
the early offerings, the Krampus one. Well, he's the sadistic imp with a strong sense of justice, because he would accompany St. Nicholas on St. Nicholas's Day, which is December 6th, and he would hand out lumps of coal and or floggings to naughty children. And he also recently got in trouble for wearing blackface, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But yes, anyway, he's known as Father Whipping. So that's the idea, though. George Cheney is kind of the founder of this one-time rail stop that blossomed into a town.
Yeah, and eventually it became known as the Cheney Depot. And just for the record, Cheney is actually spelled just like Cheney, as in Dick Cheney.
Well,
in case you're wondering what we're saying.
There is a lake up in my territory called Cheney Lake.
Oh,
see, there you
that's
go. But
cool.
see, so there's Cheney, and then they call Dick Cheney,
Yeah.
but that's actually pronounced Cheney. So yeah, you take your pick. But
Yeah.
here, I think with the French, it's Cheney.
Yes. The Cheney Depot would provide gas, water services for the passengers who were passing through the area, kind of like those blue highway signs you see today when you're on the freeway, gas, food, and lodging.
Well, yeah, you got to stop off at some point, even if you're a train. Well, we also found out that Pere Cheney was just referred to as Center Plains around that time, or just Cheney. And this is important to know, because if you're doing any kind of genealogical research on it, for example, you might not find people because you're looking for the wrong city name. So it's not clear if it was an official name for the town or just a local nickname that wound up sticking.
Yeah, because I know, for example, for me, when I went on to Ancestry.com and I was trying to dig down on some of the people that are in the cemetery there, that you couldn't find anything on them when you looked them up via the name Pere Cheney, but when you
Right.
looked up Center Plains, they would pop up. But all the locals clearly called it, and it's been handed down through oral tradition, it's been called Pere Cheney.
Yeah, no, Center Plains, I think, was the more formal, traditional, and geographically correct, name for the area. But like a lot of things, the nickname sticks.
Yes.
And that's what you remember it by.
And most of the town's early settlers were lumberjacks and farmers who were following the booming logging industry, which was developing along those rail lines heading towards Mackinac City, which is at the northernmost tip of the mitten. For most people, if your hand is like the majority of people, it would be right up there by the top of your middle finger. And
Wait, are you insulting me?
Yes, I am.
No, I'm
Here,
sorry.
let me show you.
Oh, it's a map thing. Yes, very good.
Or it would be, I'm sorry, I hate it when it does that. But the mitten is also called the Lower Peninsula.
Yes.
Which is a peninsula, for those of you not in the States or who failed geography, because it's surrounded by two of the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, which actually really is only one lake. It's one body of water, which I only just found out today. So I'm going to go ahead and cop to that. Technically, you can call it Lake Michigan Huron, or I guess there's people who call it Lake Huron, Michigan.
Depending on your...
Maybe there's a big fight about that. I don't know. But taken together, they are the largest freshwater lake, or it is the largest freshwater lake in the world by volume, and it's no stranger to folkloric tales themselves, including the infamous Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh, sing us a few
I don't know why I said
bars.
it like that. I'm not singing. Are you kidding? We digress.
Wreck of the Edmund. Are you serious? Bigger than Lake Baikal? Or
Yeah.
It's not as deep.
Yeah, no, not as deep.
That's the deepest freshwater lake ever.
Exactly.
But I think
it's
by
like 7
volume,
miles. And in fact, it's not very deep at all. I think it's only a couple hundred feet deep at its deepest point.
Yeah, it's crazy, but they get massive storms,
Yes.
wild, crazy storms, and of course the lake effect, and they get some wild weather up there, and you got to be a pretty hardy person to survive all that.
That's absolutely right. So at the heart of the development of the little town of Pere Cheney was George M. Cheney's sawmill, which seemed to be doing pretty well because George Cheney ultimately built a hotel called Cheney House to accommodate the increasing influx of lumberjacks, settlers, and tourists to the area. And also, he wound up building 2 more sawmills. I think ultimately there were 3 sawmills in Pere Cheney. It was doing very well in the logging
because
business.
there's tons of raw material there, tons of trees to plow through, and so it was kind of booming, and business was doing really well. And by December 1st of 1874, the 1-year-old town of Pere Cheney established a post office, and that's how you know you're a real town.
Yes.
It's like Steve Martin finding his own name in the phone book. I am somebody. Well, in 3 years' time, you had the 2 or 3 sawmills, but you also had a general store, a school, and a couple of carpenters, a doctor, a wagon maker, and the hotel even had a telegraph service. So there you go. You get the foundings of a nice little town there.
And 6 years later, it even became the county seat in 1879 when Crawford County, where it lies, was officially established. However, neighboring Grayling, which we mentioned earlier, became more populated, and eventually it took over the mantle of county seat.
And in 1878, it became clear that the town needed a cemetery. So just southeast of the town, right along the railroad, just as everything was, 5 acres was set aside to act as the official resting place for Pere Cheney's dead.
What happens next is kind of fuzzy, but the legend and lore of Pere Cheney, as told through oral history in the area, says that among the town's residents, there was a witch.
We must consider what a witch really is, or how a woman came to be known as one, but that is for later in the show. For now, suffice it to say that people feared her for one reason or another, be it the practice of black magic or something more mundane, and according to the legend, she was banished to the woods surrounding the town, at which point she cursed the town.
I curse this town and all of you in it with fire, plague, death, and destruction.
And off into the woods she went with her bindle, possibly an out-of-wedlock child, which may be the real reason she was ostracized.
Or the witch was captured and hanged from an oak tree in the center of the cemetery by the neck until she was dead. Afterwards being cut down and buried somewhere conveniently close by, since the cemetery was right there.
Or she was burned at the stake and then hanged, buried, banished, and or otherwise asked to leave the premises in a degrading way.
This, of course, made her feel a little put out.
Put out.
Miffed. Angry. She was angry, all right?
I see. Yes,
You don't like my
I see
words.
All right, I see where you're getting at.
It's hard to say what year all of that may or may not have happened, but Pere Cheney's prosperity and fortunes took a noted dip just 10 years after it was founded, when it was hit with diphtheria, otherwise known horrifically as the children's plague.
Oh, yes. Well, diphtheria is unkind, particularly to kids. And it's also unkind to me because it's diphtheria, not diphtheria, as we've been sometimes saying. So I've been saying it wrong My whole life. I've heard it kind of both ways in that vague way that you don't.
I only heard it the dip way. I've been saying it wrong my whole life, and I would have even typed it wrong into our outline if we didn't have spell check. I was like, why is this giving me a problem? And it's like, oh, there's an H. And then I immediately, when we were working on putting this outline together, I told Forrest, I was like, this is so weird. There's a silent H in diphtheria.
No, it's not silent.
It's not silent, because then I was like, but my last name is Philbrook. It's a PH. It makes a foot sound. And then I look it up, and it's like, oh, I'm an idiot.
Diphtheria.
Yeah,
well,
right.
no,
So anyway.
it's easier to say with a P, so that's what sticks. It's not a spoonerism, but there is a term for that, where it's the easier thing to say is what people stick
I'm
with.
sure we're going to get some emails now or some tweets about that. Anyway, all our medical people probably already knew that, but hopefully some of the rest of you learned something new tonight. I know I did.
Well, very well. Here we go. Well, anyway, diphtheria strikes Pere Cheney in 1893. We couldn't find data online regarding 1893 statistics for diphtheria, but new Astonishing Research Corps member Quade Joslin found some amazing Michigan Annual State Board of Health reports online for 1895. So thank you, Quade. And you can get a real sense of what statistics were like at the time, keeping in mind that a lot of deaths probably went undiagnosed or unrecorded.
For example, in 1895, 3,433 people in Michigan, the entire state, were documented to have come down with diphtheria, which killed about a quarter to a fifth of all it infected. But statistics also show that the highest mortality rate was among kids from 0 to 10 years old, which is brutal.
Right, and the very old. So again, it's one of those diseases that really affects the very young and the very old who have undeveloped immune systems or weakened.
Yes.
But basically, it's a lot of disease of the throat where you get a patchy gray, like a scab almost, and it becomes very painful to swallow. You get a very hoarse cough, so sometimes it's called the coughing disease, or you get a very swollen neck, where they call bull neck. So yeah, it's very uncomfortable, very painful, and a bad way to go. In Parashatia Cemetery, there's one gravestone, which we have a picture of from this outbreak, that shows a single family, the Barber family, in December of 1893, and they lost 9-year-old daughter Hattie on the 12th, 8-year-old Ray on the 26th, and 6-year-old Roy on the 29th, all within 17 days.
Yeah, so I can't even imagine. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning. After the first severe outbreak, by 3 years later, in 1896, the town's population dropped dramatically from 1,500 residents to just 55, just 3 years after the first outbreak. And it's hard to say exactly why. There were many, many deaths, to be sure, but there are only 90 plots in the Parashatia Cemetery. Many families likely moved away after the first outbreak, and history can point to several who relocated to the neighboring towns of Grayling and Roscommon, which Parashatia is nearly exactly halfway between, Grayling being to the north and Roscommon being to the south.
So 55 people are living there in 1896. In 1897, just 4 years later, the town was hit again by either diphtheria or cholera or scarlet fever. We've heard all those. And many more of the townsfolk died. When you're starting with 55 people, it doesn't take much to decimate the population. By 1901, Parashatia was down to just 25 people and clearly circling the drain. 11 years later, in 1912, the post office closed, and 5 years after that, in 1917, there were only 18 people living there.
On May 7th, 1917, the land was sold off at a public auction, and the cemetery currently is owned by the Beaver Creek Township and maintained by them, along with, it seems, one gentleman who still lives nearby and picks up the trash and trinkets people leave on the few remaining headstones that haven't been destroyed by time or, more significantly, by vandals.
So this addresses the plague of the witch's curse of Parashatia. But what about the fire?
Well, some local legends say that the residents of Grayling eventually took it upon themselves to burn what was left of Parashatia to the ground to protect themselves from the diseases that had ravaged the community.
Yes, cleansing by fire. Eventually, the only people left behind in the town of Parashatia are dead and buried in the cemetery, possibly with the very witch that brought their town to its knees and cursed them to die.
So traffic to our new website has shot up since we moved it over to Squarespace.
Well, it's pretty elegant and sophisticated now.
Unlike us.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Well, one thing I've noticed is how much easier it is to manage on the back end whenever we need to publish a page for a new episode or make some changes.
Yeah, that is true because I've been doing a lot more work on the postings, and I've noticed that a lot of it is drag and drop, which makes it really intuitive and a lot of fun, and it really speeds up the process.
Not including the time that you spend rewriting the copy over and over.
Hey, that writing is out there forever, man. Writing to me is writing, so I can't help it if I'm a perfectionist. It's just my gift.
It's your curse.
Well, that is true.
Well, I'm a design junkie, and while I'd love for us to have some absurd budget laying around in a drawer to pay somebody to build a dazzling page with lasers and holograms.
Lasers?
Yeah. I gotta be honest, though, Squarespace's award-winning designs are just gorgeous right out of the box.
And therefore has saved you from spending our hard-earned money having Exhibit pimp our website.
Well, it's a valid point. Anyway, the main thing is our show has grown a lot, and it was time for us to make our next move with Squarespace. And it turned out to be the perfect fit for us, allowing us to easily create a beautiful site with their all-in-one platform, which requires no installations, upgrades, or patches ever.
The other thing that's great is that if you're just getting started and have a name in mind for your site, their unique domain experience is fully transparent and simple to set up.
It's not just for creatives either, although there's no shortage of musicians, designers, and artists on there. It's also great for businesses, restaurants, or even just individuals who want their own online destination.
Yeah, pretty much anything you can think of.
So make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace.
That's right. Make your next move with Squarespace now. Use our offer code LEGENDS for 10% off any website subscription or domain purchase at squarespace.com. That offer code again is LEGENDS, LEGENDS.
I think people can spell legends, man.
Hey, we've both been saying diphtheria wrong for decades, so I figured, better safe than sorry.
Squarespace. Make your next move.
I'm Allison, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
All right, so this story, it's pretty simple, and it's kind of short, but it really has everything. It has all the elements of a great legend.
Well, if you look at some of the other stories about haunted cemeteries, not just in Michigan, which also has a few great ones, but there's a lot of the similar elements. So you start to see things lining up, which makes a great related story throughout the ages of everything about a place that's haunted. To start off with, you have a great backstory of hope. So a lot of prosperity, a lot of new beginnings, and people starting their lives out new and fresh. And then it's followed by tragedy.
Yeah.
And then tragedy strikes, and there's a large-scale suffering and pestilence, and you have a disease that wipes out a lot of the town.
Twice.
So so what that does, though, is get those that are living there, or the ones that are hearing the story later, understanding why people of the time might start to think that something's wrong here. Is it God? Are we being punished? Or is there an evil influence? So yes, all this pestilence and misery and suffering, this place has seen a lot of death and intense human emotion. And diseases, when they come through, like diphtheria and cholera, when they come in epidemic waves like that, you start to want to blame something or someone.
Yeah, and that's something interesting that Tess had pointed out in the research corps when we were working on this show about, whether or not the idea of the witch was scapegoated or some other idea that came up, whether or not it was real or not. But it's hard when you're faced with that kind of death and destruction on a repeated basis. It's hard to say, oh, well, this is just a scientific problem. You look for look for a place to put the blame.
No, there's got to be a reason you can understand, that you can point to and blame. And people do that to this day with the problems and tragedies they face. There's got to be a reason, not just, it's just a random science thing and, it just happens. There's unsanitary conditions. That's why these things happen. It's better to find somebody that you can point the finger at.
Yeah, good point.
So that, again, that's a witch thing. No, but it's a little bit like a Stephen King story where he has a group of people, they all start turning on each other. Not that this happened here, but what I'm saying is, like, when you have people undergoing a lot of stress and a lot of misery, even on a spiritual level, I believe that imprints something into the land itself. So you have a good foundation now for a story, along with fire and destruction and rumors of people starting fires, burning down buildings to cleanse the area, which that's the pitchfork part where you're chasing the monster away.
Yeah.
So all these elements are now, you're starting to get a pretty good legend going here. And to top it off, it's the disappearance. the town virtually disappears over a decade or two. And the only thing that's left, as they say, is a strange grassy moss that grows, but nothing else grows very well.
Yeah.
So who knows if that's true? They do say that there's a lot of grassy green moss there, at least in the cemetery part, and it's still in a clearing. So, who knows? That might be a natural biological process, but it adds to the story. But to top it all off, you need now a curse from a witch or something supernatural, like some element of evil, something that is causing this trouble that you have to try and burn out.
Yeah.
So you have somebody who is on the outskirts of society, or at least seems a little odd or off. That's a woman that has not been married, and my goodness, she's already 35. Well, she's a witch.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with her. Why isn't she married off having kids already? Or it just could be somebody who's just more, socially awkward and they don't mix well. Well, there's something wrong with you.
Well, and the other way that you get to be a witch is if you are pregnant and you're having a child out of wedlock. It's
shameful.
Well,
Yes.
also, it's far more convenient for whoever the father is to label the woman a witch and have her sent out of town than confess to adultery or, having relations out of wedlock or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
she's a witch. Nope, it's not my kid. She has to leave.
She's going to have to be banished. Yeah.
And to your point earlier, which I think is really interesting, when you were talking about how people do this to this day in terms of vilifying a person or trying to come up with a reason for something, it really does happen. You see it today in all walks of life, whether it's in a small-time setting with your office or in a microcosmic setting, but also you see it in the macrocosm. Like if you look at politics, for example, politicians are often vilified. I'm not speaking in code here. I'm not speaking in code about the president. We steer clear of politics on the show as much as we can, but even the last several presidencies, you can see where the presidents, by whatever party opposes them, have been labeled as pariahs, the antichrist, the village idiot, whatever. It's like there's all this thing. It's like, I've got to put a label on it because that's the only thing that can explain what's going on here. And you can see how that works. And by the same token, you can see it in your classroom or in your group of people that you work with. It's like, oh, well, Todd's a little weird.
Well, that's something.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah,
There's something strange about him.
Well, exactly. Especially during these times where there's a lot of rumor going around, not a lot of great information. And this is late in the era. We're not talking about the Middle Ages here, where that was rampant. Of course, the witch trials happened up until about the turn of the 19th century, so about 1800, there was a lot of killings, like maybe hundreds of thousands of innocent women were put to death. And I think of the Monty Python thing where it's like, they kind of dunk you underwater just from an accusation. And if you did happen to drown, well, you were innocent, but sorry. But if you floated and flew away, well, obviously she's a witch.
It's not just Monty Python. That's how it really went down.
Yeah,
right?
no, there was, they would dunk you on a pole. And I believe at Mackinac Island,
if you died, that proved you were just a simple mortal.
You were innocent, yes.
Yeah, an innocent.
Yeah, they were just mistaken. So sorry about that mistaken identity thing. But they were hoping you would just kind of burst into flame, turn into a bat, and fly away. So that obviously did not happen, but people could be banished or you were ostracized from society. So
they were doing that in Montana. If you committed a crime and you maybe it wasn't quite enough to hang you, they might banish you. And if it was the winter, you probably were better off being hanged, honestly.
Well,
they sent out to the woods in the
No, they stopped that. Yeah, after the first case, the first guy came back cold and hungry. I forget his name right now.
Yeah, they let him back into town.
Well, that wasn't real smart because, you felt, that's the thing. In that story anyway, people felt bad immediately. It's like, let's string him up. And then the next day, like, nah, you know what? We can't string him, be the only one being strung up. So let them all go.
Yeah.
So again, the people were flip-flopping, but they realized that banishment, it's still better than lynching, but in the wintertime, not great because where are you going to go?
Yeah. So, flip-flopping, by the way, another political label.
Right, exactly. So people are very fickle. They're very capricious and changing their minds with whatever. But in this case, the story, the kernel of it is that you have somebody who's been wronged by the town society who is now going to curse it with pestilence and fire.
Yeah.
And they're seeing a bit of that. So they're thinking this is pretty real. There's another little bit here, a nugget that
a little bit of
makes,
icing on the cake.
A little bit of icing on the cake is that the town may or may not have been intentionally or unintentionally built over a Native American burial ground.
Yeah.
Which
That's
I
we're
just-
going back to poltergeist.
Well, here's my thing. Just
Actually, no, that was a
insurance on it.
regular cemetery, wasn't it?
Well, that was, but I think that there was some Native American element in there.
Yeah.
My point is, even if you don't believe in that,
Yeah.
I'd take the insurance and don't build anything on a known burial ground, no matter who's on there.
No.
There's that park,
Bad
Estes
idea.
Park in Denver.
Yes. Not far from
Mm.
where my dad lives.
Exactly. Famously haunted. Even during the day, people see strange things walking around. Very haunted place because that was a site of a mass burial where the unscrupulous caretakers were getting paid, I think, by the box. So they were kind of chopping people up posthumously and fitting them into smaller boxes because it was cheaper
Yeah.
and going through their possessions. So again, a lot of bad mojo.
Yeah. But you know what? There's a great ultimate frisbee game there every Saturday.
Is there really? It's
No,
a
I don't know.
wide,
I'm
oh,
making
okay,
that
just a
up, but-
wide open space. All I know is that, no, I read about it and it's haunted, but also ringed by houses. It's in a very suburban area, right?
Yeah.
So this place, again, what's better about the Pere Cheney story is that it's out in the middle of nowhere. That kind of adds to the spookiness. And especially if you go visiting today, these days, like I said earlier, it's that it's hard to find, but people do go visiting. And
Yeah.
we'll have a few clips of people actually going on a self-guided tour. And you can kind of see what's there. There's not much there now, but at the time, it seemed to have a lot of promise, and then it took a bad turn.
Yeah.
And again, in a short span of time and just a couple of decades. So
Yeah, and
something's
there's-
going on.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot left today. There's virtually no trace of the town left. The cemetery remains pretty barren, except for a few broken headstones. And what's left of the area remains isolated, hard to get to, and haunted, with stories abounding of the ghosts of the children who died in the two epidemics. Now, you
yes.
can get to it. It's not easy. There's just a 2-track trail of sorts, and you need the GPS coordinates. And a car with good ground clearance, like a Jeep or maybe a Land Rover, or I don't know. If you can take a stock Jeep
right.
and put maybe like a 3-inch lift kit on it.
I
and
see,
some
you're
35s or 37. I don't know if you'd need 37s.
You can have recommendations
No,
on,
and I don't-
on the website.
Yeah, I don't
or-
think you'd need lockers. I'm sorry, I'm getting off.
Yeah, no, I thought you were going to go off in a clinic here.
Yeah. But
okay.
anyway.
No, what it is don't take your parents' Buick LeBaron
No.
out to go see it. You're going to get high-centered and get stuck there. Again,
Yeah, 'cause
it's
you
not
don't-
a
you
great
don't have-
place to get stuck.
Exactly. You don't have the proper breakover angle or the
there-
angle of approach or the angle depart. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
please,
People are
please.
super bored.
Yeah, no.
Except for the car people.
Yeah, even them. Well, no, look.
Ouch.
The thing is, it's a real place. You can actually visit it. It had a real history and a beginning, and real people died there. And it all went away in a very short amount of time. So it did have history, as short-lived as it was, that saw also a lot of misery. So it's a very strange tale of a town that's not all like, well, you know what? It's like, well, they found gold in the town next door, so everybody packed up and put their shops up there. Although Bannock is supposedly haunted as well, some parts of it. But, I was going to say this about the Native American campground or burial grounds there, is that, yeah, you might think that's a cliche, but like I say about cliches, that you wouldn't get it if it didn't have some truth to it and people weren't repeating it all the time. So there does seem to be, if you believe in any of this kind of a hoodoo voodoo kind of mumbo jumbo spookiness here, that things do seem to emanate from places that have a lot of sacredness to it. So yes, the Indian burial ground, the Native American ceremonial burial grounds there, that's not a great start for this town. And it just adds to the whole thing. And so nowadays, people do see strange things there.
Yeah.
They hear strange things. Strange things happen to their cars. They see orbs, all kinds of weirdness.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. We also wanted to say, just while we are talking about it, when we talk about these kinds of places in general on our show, we do not encourage our listeners to go there, especially in the case of disrespecting the property and that sort of thing. We wouldn't expect that any of you guys would do that, but we know that that is a lot of what's happened to Pere Cheney Cemetery, which is sad because a lot of the gravestones that people will tell you were there, even in the 70s, have been destroyed, smashed with hammers. And
No, yeah, people taking sledgehammers, bringing stuff with them because, again, no one's out there really to monitor you, so you can drink your 12-pack and go nuts on the place. and people take out their frustrations. And it's a kind of a strange, troubled person that wants to smash up some headstones.
Well, yeah. Do you remember our episode, Choose Your Own Adventure? When
I do.
Yeah, my buddy David had to witness an unhinged schoolmate beating up a corpse at Hard Island in New York. That episode is not for the faint of heart, by the way.
Not for the faint of heart island.
Yeah.
The idea, though, is that people do this because it happens everywhere. And for whatever reason, it's like a thing unto itself, but very disturbing. But some people feel compelled or empowered by desecrating graves. Like being able to kick somebody when they're down and they can't fight back.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the things that might have been the actual origin
Some
for some
real
of the
causes.
issues. Yeah, some
Yeah.
real causes. As we deconstruct, we get a little bit into some theories on what might have brought about the plagues, for example, besides a witch cursing.
The supernatural.
She's like, I'm going to get you. Well, here's one thing about it. Pere Cheney did not have a great water supply, for one thing.
Right.
And that's a huge issue. That seems like such a simple idea, but that's an issue for putting out fires. That's an issue for hygiene in a major way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So most towns, when they're founded, they start off near a water source, and it's a river or, at least a creek or a creek, depending on where you're from the country, how you say it.
Yeah.
A stream, something, springs.
Yeah.
You need a source of fresh water. And I'm sure that there's probably wells, because you can always sink a well generally in a lot of places in the U.S.
Yes.
Because I can't imagine that all of their water supply is being trained in,
No.
On the train. But even the train itself, even the old steam locomotives, they need water. That's the old water tower. The jerk water town, you ever heard that expression? That's where that comes from. So what we're saying here, though, is that there's no major fresh water supply or way of getting it distributed through the town or the village. It's a tiny town.
Yes, very small.
It's
we have
very
maps
small.
of it posted in our images, which you can see, and also maps of the cemetery plot. So.
Exactly. So, and again, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of great hygiene. This is not real late into the 19th century, but people aren't enjoying a bath every day.
Well, Marie, who is one of our most active members in the Astonishing Research Corps, is convinced that rats brought diphtheria into the area.
Well, she's a little hung up on rats.
No, she was talking about these rats. It actually is interesting. She cites this story from the Wichita Beacon. This was published on July 13th, 1887. Check the story out. Headline, Killed by Rats. Detroit, Michigan, July 13. The remains of a human being. By the way, if you're listening at night, this next section might not be the best part to listen to right before bed. You might want to turn this off and
But be sure to
come back to it tomorrow
I
when
see.
you're on the train or in your car.
Right. At the pet store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Or
your warning.
You might want to fall asleep watching Willard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Either version.
Good call. Here we go. Killed by rats. Detroit, Michigan, July 13th, 1887. The remains of a human being, wholly unrecognizable, were found Sunday on the road between Pere Cheney and Fletcher. While the inquest was being held, a young man named Davis, who had been drawn by curiosity to pay a second visit to the spot where the corpse was found, dashed among the jurors with badly tattered clothing and a bloody club and the solution of the mystery. The unknown man had been killed by field rats. The young man had himself been attacked by them and had to fight for his life. When he approached the spot, he said the vicious hordes sprang upon him from all sides, and although he killed many of them, it seemed only to whet the courage of the survivors. He was obliged to make a run for it and had been followed almost to the inquest, some of his assailants clinging to him and biting him cruelly.
Okay.
All right, so that's quite a story. Not sure what's going on there. We've actually got it on good authority that rats don't usually attack people, especially people who are awake. But we do have a study done from 1974 to 1996 and published in 1999 in Pediatric Digest by Randall Hirschhorn and Robert Hodge. And it says the following. Here's the abstract for the study. I just want to read this first because sometimes I'm amazed at the kinds of studies that happen.
Yes, everything you can imagine.
Objective. This study sought to assess the occurrence of rat bites within an urban population and examine the demographic characteristics to determine whether risk factors can be identified. Methods. An observational epidemiologic study was used to collect rat bite data from 1974 to 1996 and plot the incidence of rat bites and factors relating to the characteristics of the victim, circumstances of the bite, and the environmental conditions present at the time and the location of the bite. Comparison between the first 10 years and the last 12 years was made to gauge changes in the incidence of rat bites. Results. A total of 622 rat bite cases were confirmed, with incidence gradually decreasing each year. Rat bites primarily affected children 5 years of age and younger. The majority of bites were inflicted on the face and hands and occurred in the bedroom between midnight and 8 a.m. Physical conditions of the structure in which the bite occurred and adjoining structures were significant factors in rat bite incidence. Most bites occurred in the warmer months. The majority of the cases occurred between midnight and 6 a.m., 83% of them.
All right. So just don't go to sleep.
Yeah, don't go to sleep. Were you trying to go to sleep right now? The area of the body, the area of the body where rat bites occurred was analyzed. Data indicate that 48.3% of the victims were bitten on the hand, 19.6% were bitten on the head, 15% on the foot, and 9% on the leg. The 1985 through 97 data substantiate the fact that the areas most commonly bitten are still the victim's hands and head. The phenomenon of why certain areas of the body are bitten more or less often than are other areas can be explained by considering another victim-related variable, activity when bitten. The vast majority of victims, 86% of those whose activity was reported, were asleep when bitten. The location and room where the bite occurred also have a bearing on where and when the victim received a bite. The data show that 83% of the victims were at home when they were bitten. Not surprisingly, 84% were indoors at the time, and 60% were in the bedroom of their residence when bitten. That's not where you are right now, is it? I hope not. The point here is...
Oh, you're talking to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm talking to the listeners.
I'm sitting right here next to you.
Yes, you're right there. Right, so that's all I'm taking from that report. If you want to read the entire thing, we have a link to it. It's fabulous.
Don't know why you would.
Late night reading.
Unless you're Marie.
Yeah. Yes, Marie, you've got to find that. I'm the one that tracked that down. It was referenced in an article that our researchers found, and then that was a dead link, so I went to the Pediatric Journal and continued to search for it until I found it.
Very good, sir.
Really wanted to read it. But anyway, the point here is that rats don't seem to attack people who are awake and mobile.
No, and I also read, at least with diphtheria, that there's no proof that it's zoonotic, meaning that diphtheria may or may not be transmitted by animals.
Right.
There's some people who think it might be, but there's no studies to prove or data yet and studies done that proves the link.
Well, yeah, and so here's what I think about this story in the Wichita Beacon, in 1887. I think the story is either made up or our hero of the story, or should I say victim, was passed out or drunk or had under the influence, in which case I can see the rats participating in the consumption of him. I still don't know why the other guy came running into the courtroom, apparently with rats still attached to him, and a bat. Unless he killed the first guy and then tried to make it look like a rat attack.
Ooh, rat attack. Yeah.
Rat attack.
That's always a good excuse.
It's the name of my new band.
Yeah, right. So what you're saying, well, Rat, R-A-T-T, remember them?
Yeah, of course I do.
Right.
Round and round.
Exactly. So the idea, though, is that rats don't seem to Willard-like attack en masse. I think even Debbie said that she knows people that raise, had pets and had a bunch of them.
And it's not something they would do.
No, exactly. Totally out of character. Not
even
really
if Crispin Glover was there.
Even they would have to be so hungry, and I think they would maybe nibble at you for a good couple of weeks. Father's Day is right around the corner.
I don't know if a month away is really right around the...
You know what I mean. Besides, a month feels like 10 minutes to me these days.
Well, I hear you on that. If your life is moving too slow, start a podcast, combine that with having a kid, blend, and we'll see you in 20 years.
Well, so as I was saying, Father's Day is right around the corner.
All right, let me get down to business here. Mm-hmm. Does your dad have a beard? Is it unruly? Are you embarrassed to be seen with him in public? This Father's Day, bring him forth from the dark ages of overpriced drugstore razors that have gotten so absurdly expensive they have to be kept in display cases resembling the bowels of Fort Knox.
These are questions from your son, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, help your dad break the shackles of that absurdity by signing him up at harrys.com, where company founders Jeff and Andy...
Wait, there's no Harry?
No, it's named after our president.
President Harry?
Oh, my God. Did you make it out of elementary school?
Oh, Truman, got
Yes.
it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go on.
All right. Well, anyway, company founders Jeff and Andy were fed up with getting ripped off by a certain unnamed giant razor company that has been relentlessly increasing prices at the expense of its customers and laughing all the way to the bank.
They knew there was only one way to ensure quality and fair prices for you shavers out there.
Shavers.
People that need to shave. I don't know. Anyway, they bought their own blade. They bought their own blade factory.
Oh, yeah. No, it's in Germany, home of Porsche.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they bought their own blade factory, and by taking less profit and selling directly to you over the internet, Harry's offers their blades at half the price of their drugstore competitors.
Just $2 per blade versus $4 or more at the drugstore.
Harry's is so confident that you or your dad will love their blades. They're going to let you or your dad try their trial set for free. You just cover the $3 for shipping.
Harry's free trial set comes with a weighted ergonomic razor handle, 5 precision-engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade,
and a rich lathering shave gel, as well as a travel blade cover. That's a $13 value for you or your dad for free just for trying them out.
Stop messing around with overpriced blades and get started shaving with Harry's today by claiming your free trial offer. Again, it's a $13 value for free. You just cover the shipping.
To get your free trial set, including a razor handle, 5-blade cartridge, and shave gel, go to harrys.com/ALP right now.
Do it for Dad. That's harrys.com/ALP.
Hi, I'm Lincoln Ashley, and you're listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now back to the show.
All right, so you have to ask yourself, is all of this stuff just born from the lore surrounding the cemetery at Pere Cheney? Because it's not just about the town, it's about the cemetery. The cemetery is the only thing left behind, and it's what people still talk about and what people visit, because there's nothing really to talk about with regard to everything else because it's gone.
Well, again, a lot of the buildings had burnt down. The great part of the story is that people, fearing disease and pestilence and a curse, decided to cleanse the area. Was it like that movie 1408 where it just says, burn me, the room itself?
Yeah.
Because that's how you cleanse things with fire. That the townsfolk and neighboring townsfolk, we don't want any of that kind of evil around here, so they burn it all to the ground to get rid of it.
Supposedly,
but
corroborate.
Exactly, it's uncorroborated. It's
uncorroborated. Supposedly, people are cringing.
I'm cringing. The worst story is that sparks from the sawmill started a fire, and because the water sources were so poor and not connected, a lot of fires just burnt down.
Yeah,
because all they could do is throw water on it or have a bucket brigade, or maybe even a mobile pumper, but that doesn't do much because sawdust is very explosive.
Right, or just sit down and draw a circle in the dirt.
Well, yeah, think about moving
right
to the lovely areas of Grayling or Ross Commons. So that's more likely what happened. There are sparks from the sawmills or some kind of industrial fire spread, and they at some point couldn't save a lot of the buildings and they just burnt down.
Yeah.
And after that happens for a decade or two, all you're left with are just the foundations, and eventually those get grown over.
Yeah.
So really all you have, again, talking about what's left is that, stone survives. For centuries, except when you have and teenagers busting them up with sledgehammers. But in this case, you still have a few headstones left over.
Well, and also the story about the fire is we couldn't find anything on it. The Ark couldn't find anything documenting. There was sawmill fire, possibly, but there was nothing documenting the idea
willful arson?
Yeah, willful arson.
I see. Yeah.
And I also read in somewhere, now I can't remember, and forgive me for not being able to cite the source on this, but that the environment in general and the materials that they were using to build back then were at odds with each other.
Yeah.
It's just not something, fire or no fire, it's just not going to be around very long.
No, these things happen nowadays. There's fires all over town, industrial fires.
Yeah, but I'm talking about I'm talking about the earth just reclaiming the structures.
Yeah.
Well, just time and humidity.
You'd be surprised how fast things get grown over and forgotten. They get swallowed up. We talk about that with buried treasure. How many of these stories, guys come back, even with a crudely drawn map, and can't find their own treasures again.
Yeah.
Henry Plummer's treasure, gone forever, the hills of Montana. So, in this case, though, the town being out in the middle of nowhere to begin with, it just, the trees and the grasses swallow it back up. They cleared the trees out of the area of the cemetery, but that's still clear. So there's a clearing there, as you can see from the photos we'll have and some of the videos where guys have taken, they're there respectfully, just poking around. There's a couple of guys with a metal detector. Some guys are there just taking photographs, but it shows you what it looks like. And it's not remarkable. It's unremarkable. So, but really that's the only kind of identifying factor is that there's kind of a clear open patch where the cemetery is. And that was a few miles, I think, south of the original town site.
Yeah, if you know where to look on Google Earth, you can pick out the cemetery. Yeah, if you go straight down the train tracks from where it is, you can find the clearing where the cemetery is. You can still see some of the gravestones on the satellite view.
Exactly. Well, this is not the only, of course, haunted cemetery story in Michigan. And I'm sure every state has their own. I know from my own state and even here in California, there's plenty of them. Pennsylvania, I'm sure, Frenchtown, some of the old, lots of hauntings.
Well, that's New Jersey, but...
Oh, I'm sorry, that's across the river.
Right
yes.
across
But
the river, yeah.
In Bucks County, though, in Pennsylvania,
yes.
There's a lot of spooky wood stories.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's Bigfoot stories, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Bucks County. And UFOs.
Right.
There's been a few flaps.
I think it's probably
as John Ventre
you.
would say, yeah.
Exactly. But to point out, I found another instance here in a book called Weird Michigan. And this one's about the Silverbrook Witch. And this comes from the town of Niles in Michigan. But there's a beautiful old cemetery, and it has a wrought iron archway gate. And it's called Silverbrook. And listen to this. A witch is said to be buried there, although the location of her grave is unknown. If you happen to be there at the right hour of the night, the story goes, her screams reverberate through the chapel at the center of the cemetery. So again, vague witch, possibly tied with that. Don't know where she's buried. Not really sure, but she's there. People have heard screams, and there you go. And so it's the foundation of a good haunting.
Yes, which may just be a lady who didn't have a boyfriend.
Well, it's something. Yeah, I mean,
it's not really fair, is it?
Well, not if you get ganged up on. But what's more interesting, and I guess, or more thin in this case, is that if you really can't find a witch or even anybody that the story points to, it's just, that's the story. They go with it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's almost nearly impossible to track down.
Well, it's funny you should mention that book, or maybe it's not a coincidence.
Well, because I'm looking at it. Yes.
Yes, it is actually written by a former guest of the show, Linda Godfrey, whom we had on about her book, Monsters Among Us, which we aired shortly after the Skinwalker series. Linda is somewhat of an expert on werewolves and dogmen and creatures like the Beast of Bray Road in Wisconsin. But she's also done a lot of research on the paranormal in general, and obviously having written Weird Michigan.
Right, it's a series
did
of books.
A ton of research on Michigan for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, Mark Moran and Mark Squirman have this series of books, Weird whatever, but this one's Weird Michigan. And Linda has written a lot of the articles in here with contributions from people who are local residents in these various Michigan towns. But she traveled extensively throughout the state to gather these stories. It's a lot of fun. It's great little coffee book table reading here, little excerpts of good, creepy stories here. And just some fun things, too, some folk art stuff that's just that's weird about Michigan and fun.
Yeah, and we figured since we knew her, why don't we call her up and see if she'd come on the show and maybe lend us a little bit of insight. And she agreed to come back on the show. So here's a short clip of one of the things that she had to say about another haunted cemetery in Michigan.
There's Tecumseh, which is one of my favorite towns in Michigan for its historic little buildings, has a Brookside cemetery. And there is this concrete chair, looks like a easy chair or a library sort of chair, sitting there. The cemetery goes back to 1853 itself. And this is known as the witch's chair. And on the back of the chair, you can find the name engraved of a very prominent early family. And supposedly, the local legend is that one of the women in that family was a witch or strange or something like that. That was the quote. And there's a nearby Stacy Mansion, which also has a very colorful background. It was lived in by a judge and his wife, and they had a daughter who was a spinster. And every time somebody got whooping cough or somebody's farm animal died, they would blame it on Luana because there was a certain time in our history where spinsters were very likely to be thought of as witches. And so it may be the reason that this became called the witch's chair. It doesn't mean that Loana was a witch, but that was the legend that developed.
Right, so that's a fascinating story.
Well, there's some obvious similarities to our Pere Cheney story.
Yeah.
But this is a good one because it does have an object that's still there. It's a very well-kept cemetery there in Tecumseh. But the chair it kind of looks, I don't know, Greco-Roman of sorts.
Yeah, we have a picture of it.
A lot of people will build concrete benches so you can sit and reflect and talk to your loved ones. And this one is just kind of like a single chair for a person. And what she meant is that on the back of the chair, as you're facing it,
yeah, not the back
name.
behind,
yeah,
but
not
the back of the
which,
upright back of the chair facing you.
Which might make it a little uncomfortable on your back, maybe the raised letters. But,
yeah.
but it's the family name of Stacy. So,
well, if you're a vapor, it's not such a big deal.
If you're a ghost, I guess, yeah, it's all fine. Well, this lawyer, first name was Consider, I guess, Alfonso Stacy, and his wife Mary. And in the 1850s, he was a very prominent and powerful businessman in the area, and he ran for Congress unsuccessfully. But he was also the postmaster, so he was a known figure around town. And I'm guessing popular. And the only deal with his daughter is that she didn't get married and just work for her dad at the post office.
Right.
So she just helped him. I guess she was a bookworm, nerdy, liked letters, epistles, and such, but never was very social. The other thing, the kind of a weird mark against the family was that the parents, Consider and Mary, were, and I'm sure the kids, were members of the Universalist Church, which other mainstream denominations thought, that's a little weird. These guys are suspect to begin with. And that daughter, look at that, not getting married. Look at her. She's 32. What's going on there?
Yeah.
So people, I love that quote, too, that Linda mentioned. She's a witch. I don't know. Or maybe just weird. I don't know. Just strange.
Yeah. Right.
Good enough,
Right.
So when there's an outbreak, as in any case, in any school, any grade school, as you know, as a dad, it's like, oh, all the kids, not so much lice anymore. But that happens.
Yeah.
Or something. Or there's
lice still happens.
It does.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It happens. Or there's strep throat, or there's a bad cold going around, or flu, or anything. Well, who's to blame? It's that lady, the crazy one who's unmarried down the street,
Yeah.
And so that kind of sticks with you. And then people start, especially back in those days, probably not so much, hopefully, during these times.
Yeah.
Here in the States anywhere where you're labeled a witch, because now I think if you are a white witch or into Wicca, you just kind of claim that. It's
right.
like it's not a bad deal
Yeah.
anymore. But what was interesting about Loana is that she outlived both her parents and her other 4 siblings, and ended up living in the house by herself for years after that, outliving them all. Maybe she was a witch.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so now they say that the locals anyway will say that if you ask them, what's a haunted place here at Tecumseh? Oh, yeah, it's that house. It's the Stacy house, the mansion, the Stacy mansion, because she can be seen and heard walking the hallways and the rooms at night.
Or you can go sit in her chair at the cemetery.
You can.
She has a very uncomfortable back.
Yeah, you're not going to be lounging, but you can go sit in it. It doesn't look very creepy. But again, that's
I don't know. I disagree. I think it looks pretty creepy.
Well, one, it's in a cemetery. That's the first thing. Plus, it's concrete. So with, again, these scroll-type arms. So that's a little odd, but you need to name it. So now it's called the Witch's Chair. And again, that name just stuck. So whether she was a witch or not, probably not. The name stuck, and that's what the cemetery is known for now.
Yeah, right. And so the bottom line is there's no evidence that we could find anywhere, or that we can tell that any researcher has found, that there was ever any resident of Pere Cheney who was accused of being a witch, or hanged in the cemetery, or burned at the stake, or cremated, or there's no record of any type of a young woman being banished.
Yeah.
But it makes, as you would say, it makes for a good story.
It's a weird dichotomy, I guess, because you can ask some longtime local residents who've researched it, who are curious about it, and they couldn't find anything. Yet, on the other hand, everybody in the town just knows, like, yep, the witch is there. She's buried under the big oak tree.
Right.
That's what they did with her. Or they burned her, and the ashes are under the oak tree or something. But basically, there was a witch, something, So
or they can tell you where her headstone is, or was.
Yeah, exactly. She had a headstone. That was common knowledge or part of common lore then. So, and to this day, but again, nobody can find any evidence of it.
Well, Linda had some interesting insight on this whole thing and the birth of how these women became labeled as witches as well. So we're going to play that segment real quick.
I think that's really been the case for many, many types of civilizations around the world for a very long time. Older women, they're known, for instance, they're known as crones. We have these other words to call them, are sort of looked on, people will look at them askance because they're not raising families. They seem to have all this time. They're something a little different, and there's something about us that just wants to call out other people who aren't in the mainstream. And when you have something happen, like your heifer suddenly falling over and dying, you don't know anything about modern medicine, you're going to blame somebody. And there were a lot of beliefs brought over from most European countries that had sort of a witch culture. The Germans had their hexerai that became the Pennsylvania Dutch. But it was, a sort of religious belief that they had and was very complex. It could be healing as well, but you would just find this with when you have an older woman living alone, not married. People think, wonder why she's not married. Wonder why she wore a red sash today. They just become suspicious. It was kind of the same way in the Middle Ages when people were accusing their neighbors of being werewolves, and they were looking for odd little signs. If you had eyebrows that grew too closely together, or people would be checking the palms of your hand for fur, that kind of thing. We're always looking for someone to blame these inexplicable things on. I mean, I'm no sociologist or ethnographer, but that is the sort of story that occurs over and over and over again when you see these graves labeled the witch's chair, the whatever it is. You'll find that they've been sort of singled out really for probably no good reason that anyone could point out. It's just that's how they were known.
In the end, you start to see where the legends and lore begin to develop in a story like this. A lot of it is nearly made up out of whole cloth, and some of it drawn from, but wildly exaggerated from real events. Then, once the lore starts and the location and the events begin to become legendary, then you get new players on the scene. And again, we defer to Linda and her knowledge of the area.
There's also a story that somebody wrote to my Weird Michigan website that mentioned a Crawford County sheriff who desecrated a grave and drove around with a human skull in his rear window. So, I mean, people also did not used to have the proper reverence and respect for cemeteries. And I was going to say that we do now, but now that I think of it, all the teens that drink and do other things in cemeteries, that's probably an ongoing. Some people are more respectful than others in every generation, I guess.
All right, so everyone is getting in the game. Wait, who drives around with a skull in the back of the, especially a sheriff's officer?
No, who does is the guy that your friend David felt compelled to row out to Hard Island, who beat up the corpse with the iron rod. That's who's doing that. It's just very strange that somebody would do that and not feel any compunction. I could see if it was a plastic skull from your science class.
Yeah.
Or some Halloween decoration. That's fun. But a skull that was not cleaned, that was just really from somebody. Oh, that reminds me. I'm not sure if I mentioned this. Somebody dug up and stole Henry Plummer's skull.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And it was on display at one of the.
It was in a bar, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, until the bar burned down, and then it was lost. But just a weird, macabre thing. And I was talking to Debbie about this over email.
Debbie Chestnut.
Right. The most famous one that I knew of was the legend of somebody stealing Nostradamus' skull.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you drank from it, the skull bowl, the little head bowl there, you would receive his. Yes.
Is that a technical term?
The cranium.
Okay.
Like the cranium,
okay.
Yes. If you drank from the cranium.
Nobody better be drinking from my head bowl. That's all I'm saying.
No. Or just made into an ashtray or something.
I'm going to be cremated.
Well, but you don't have special powers. See, if you drank from Nostradamus's.
You don't know that.
No, by now I can pretty much guess. You do get things done in a pinch here with the show. I'll give you that. But just foretelling the future, no. Because you would see some of the problems coming up that we have to face.
Yeah.
The idea, though, is that if you drank from it, the legend said that you would receive Nostradamus's visions, and 3 of Napoleon's soldiers, who are always great to blame for everything, shoot the nose off the Sphinx or some kind of hijinks back in those 1830s times.
Did they do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the legend, is that some of Napoleon's soldiers had fired a cannon at the nose of the Sphinx, but I don't believe that that's true.
How do you
I don't
collect
know.
this information?
Just don't ask. It's just bits of crud here and there, and I can't ever forget it. So, but I do get it wrong when I'm telling people onto a podcast. I'll mix stuff up. So I'm sure a lot of this is mishmashed. Well, the story goes is that, yes, and I learned this from In Search Of, The Leonard Nimoy narrated one where these 3 soldiers did dig up his skull. They drank wine. Of course, they're French. So they drank wine from Nostradamus's cranium. I'm not sure if there's a vision, a momentary one, but what happened was that it's also cursed, and the soldier was hit by a stray bullet and killed immediately.
Wow.
But that's part of the great story.
Yeah.
You know, don't, there's a curse on Shakespeare's bones, you know.
Yeah, of
Cursed
course.
be who messes with these bones. So here, again, curses and skullduggery and disinterment. All these are great.
Sacrilege.
Yeah, it's sacrilege in real life, but it's also great stories, which may or may not be true. Now, we could not find anything about the sheriff.
We could not.
Yeah, the Crawford County sheriff, who did it as a young boy. Not that makes it any better, but he did it as a teen.
I thought it was. I thought it was in the back of the squad car.
Well, the story that I read is that I don't know how he got a hold of the skull, either from hijinks with his other buddies, dug up a skull, or he just found it, whatever. But he kept it, and so when he was older, and a Crawford County sheriff used to drive around with the skull on the back window shelf.
So it was in the squad
next
car.
to the Kleenex box.
But it's okay because he stole it 30 years earlier.
Yeah, it's fine. He did it as a kid.
Or whatever.
You know, kids will be kids, right? Pranks.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm not. Again,
not okay with. But yeah, you're right. We couldn't find any. The ARC could not find any evidence of that story being true. But it's not exactly the type of thing that would make the papers either. So
no, it might be local
or be recorded.
Exactly. That's the thing. Is I was checking the newspaper archives there, and there's not much mention of Pere Cheney at all.
Yeah.
You think there'd be more.
It's vanished.
Right.
It's not there. But I mean, maybe it's because we should be looking at Center Plains, but we looked for that too and didn't find a whole lot. That town does not have a big fingerprint, really.
Exactly. That's well said, because there are these reported quotes. So what happens is that there's a quote from the current sheriff, or just a few years ago, not the one who drove around with the skull. I'm sure this is a good sheriff.
Yeah.
Basically saying, though, that there's always something happening over at the Pere Cheney cemetery, because, what we do know is that people do show up there and litter and drink.
Well, in 2009, a couple of kids went out looking for it, and while they were there, apparently were shot at by a man with a shotgun.
Yeah.
And what did make the news.
Yeah, because they reported it. But like we said, a guy lives a couple miles away, I think, but he doesn't go and cleans up the beer cans and picks up, people will leave little mementos there, stuff, animals for the children's graves, flowers. There's people who are respectful, but there's also people who just kind of mess with it and leave trash.
Yeah.
Well, you can go a lot of parts of the country here and get shot at if you're disrespecting somebody's property. So the point here is don't go disrespecting the dead.
Indeed. Well, we'd like very much to thank Linda Godfrey for her time and coming back on the show. We have some other clips of her observations that we're going to be posting for our patrons at our Patreon website, which is another way you can support us if you want to. That's over at patreon.com/astonishinglegends.
All one word?
All one word.
Oh, very good.
And it has all the vowels, unlike our Twitter handle.
That's what I always ask.
Yeah, which we had to take vowels
I know,
out
that
of.
was, forced.
Lame. Yeah, anyway. But people are still finding us. So anyway, we'll have some extra clips over there of stuff that Linda contributed but did not make it into this episode.
Hey, Scott, you dig archaeology, right?
Oh, nice pun. I do. Nice pun.
Yeah, but I'm just seeing if you're paying attention.
Of course.
Well, then I'm sure you're enjoying our latest lecture series over at the Great Courses Plus, Pompeii, Daily Life in an Ancient Roman City.
Yes, I definitely am. And along with that, and all the other history and science subjects you and I both like, I've also been checking out their courses on genealogy, which is actually a longtime hobby of mine. And I can watch them on my smartphone while I'm letting my son play at the park, or even at night on my tablet in bed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the courses are all portable because you can stream their massive library of over 8,000 videos on any device you have. But you also don't have to use your cellular minutes to do it. You can download the lectures at home on Wi-Fi and then watch them offline anytime and anywhere you want.
Yeah, that's how I do it. Well, let's talk a little bit about our latest course, because Pompeii has always fascinated me ever since I was a kid. But this lecture series is telling me about the bigger picture. Like, I didn't fully realize that the eruption of Vesuvius was kind of complex, mostly because everyone just thinks it happened quickly, buried everyone in the city, and that was that. But it was really a 3-day event. And while Pompeii got about 30 feet of light ash and pumice, the town of Herculaneum, 8 miles away, got rapidly covered in about 60 feet of superheated magma and mud, which solidified into solid rock. So unlike Pompeii, where you can excavate it just using shovels, Herculaneum had to be dug out with jackhammers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that light ash and pumice is why Pompeii is so well preserved and why it's such an archaeological marvel, because it's maybe the best example of what daily life was like for average Romans from all walks of life. There are over 50,000 pieces of writing on the walls of Pompeii, like graffiti and political ads that were remarkably well preserved, and it really gives us an insight into their lives that you don't get anywhere else.
All that graffiti and political signage, man, some things never change.
That's true.
Well, if you want to see just how similar your life right now is to an ancient Roman's, sign up for the Great Courses Plus, and you can watch this or any of their courses for free for a whole month. Just use our special URL, thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
Well, one thing that's changed for the better is that everyone nowadays has a great opportunity to learn and have fun, so sign up now and get your free month, because we know you're going to love it. Go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
Remember, that's thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Jordana. Now back to the show.
Okay, so when you look at the big picture of all this, maybe it's all just made up, right? Can't be haunted. It's just a town that fell on bad times. The train stopped coming there. And the railroad did shut down, by the way. I can't remember what year it was, but that contributed to the problem. The sawmills shut down, and after the disease and even fires brought on by lack of water, people just moved away.
Yeah, let's say by 1917, it was kind of over. But the cemetery stayed behind.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of stories about people experiencing things at the cemetery, right?
Here's the point of it. You can say that there's no witch. There's no witch's body that was buried or burned or hanged or whatever. There was no witch's headstone. There might have been a headstone there that had a young woman's name on it, which everybody took to think that was the witch's headstone and became local legend and lore, or maybe not at all. Right. And it was just a sad ending to a little boom town that never went anywhere, that did see its share of real misery and death and suffering in its short life. But at the end of it, the bodies are still there. And of course, it's still a real cemetery.
Yeah.
And pretty much every cemetery will have some stories, I believe.
And what are some of the stories that are associated with Pere Cheney?
Well, the ones that we hear about quite a bit that keep getting repeated over and over again are orbs, your favorite.
Yes, the
strange
classic orb.
Yes.
Although I've come around a little bit on
Have
them
you come around?
since
Okay.
the Skinwalker
Yeah,
series.
that's right. That's the one that twisted your noodle there.
Yeah.
But the one that you hear mostly, and I think it has to do with the diphtheria, is the laughter of little children.
Yeah.
Which, in this sense, it's like you might say, you kids get away from my car, you're getting handprints on it. But people have claimed to have seen handprints of children on their car.
Well, and this is something I talked about at our live presentation in Detroit when we were covering this story. In North Carolina and in a lot of states across the country and places around the world, I'm sure, there's a Gravity Hill location, which I can't remember exactly where the one in North Carolina is, but this is a place where you go and you park your car at the bottom of a hill, and then you put it in neutral and you take the brake off and the car rolls up the hill. Yeah. There's a few of those places around the world. I'm pretty sure I feel like I remember seeing about one in the UK or in France somewhere. But the one in North Carolina, supposedly if you sprinkled flour on the trunk of your car,
yes,
when you got to the top of the hill, there would be handprints.
Because they were pushing the car.
They were pushing the car
up the hill, ghostly. Well, in this instance, I think what's very interesting is that most of the children's stories about the laughter and some of the strange things that have been seen there come mostly from one person's account. Someone named Nikki has written in to a couple of websites, and I think it's the same person. I see the spelling of the name Nikki because it's unusual. Has written in to Linda's old website, which she does not maintain anymore, but it's weirdmichigan.com. And this is what I love about Nikki and her story. She'd heard the false tellings and all these made up kind of things, and she's a Grayling resident, grew up there.
Yeah.
And said, you know what, I'm tired of all the witches nonsense. I'm going to set this record straight, and did some research of her own, if we can believe her, and lays down the story straight. And has seen some very strange things there. And late at night, one night there was giggling very near the car, giggling of children.
Yeah.
When she went to leave, there were tiny handprints, I think all over the car, maybe just the trunk and the roof. But that's odd. Shouldn't be children there late at night. And has also seen kind of a ghostly figure walking around in the background, maybe of a woman, a shrouded woman of sorts. So what happens here that's interesting about this tale is that this seminal ghost story, or ghost happenings, if you will, gets picked up by other people and told by other websites who are doing an article or mentioning Pere Cheney. You'll start hearing it's like, oh, the children's handprints, that's creepy. It's like the flower on the trunk or on the back bumper. Ooh, that's a nice twist. So that's a fact that gets mentioned again and again by other people doing the story that gets cemented into this little telephone game of a legend. So I believe Nikki, just the way she outlines it, it's like her count seems to kind of ring true. It's your standard ghostly cemetery kind of haunting stuff, nothing too outrageous, But what's interesting is that she also says, hey, I grew up in Grayling. We made tons of trips there. I've been there probably 200 times. And out of that time, only about maybe 10 times has something really strange happened.
Yeah.
Which I find humorous because it's like, that's 10 times something really creepy and weird has happened.
Yeah.
But her point was being...
And if you'd only gone those 10 times, you would have said 100% of the time.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, percentage-wise, it's low, but still 10 strange occurrences happened. But her point really was that it's not as much as people make it out to be. And we had said this about Skinwalker Ranch, and I guess Greyfriars a little bit too. You're not guaranteed to have a freak out, weird sleepless night experience with scratches and bruising and all that kind of stuff. Most of the time, nothing happens. And that was...
by the way, I forgot to tell you, we just got a picture a few weeks ago from a woman who got scratches on her neck at Greyfriars.
Okay, so it does happen all the time.
Well,
take that back.
No, but it's interesting. We've had, since we did that show, we've probably had at least 20 people go and do the tour.
That's right.
And nothing has happened to any of them, but we did get this photo of this woman who went a couple years ago, before we did the show, just before we did the show, not too long.
Right.
Her sister got scratches on her neck, and we had the picture, and I've been waiting to publish it, but we will do that.
Well, who on the other side of the veil?
It's crazy.
Who knows what frequency is like for them? They have no time there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
On the other night, I saw Danny McBride recount a story about when he was working at the Burbank Holiday Inn. And
on Stephen Colbert.
That's right. And he had heard stories from the employees there that the lounge at the very top was haunted. And so he took a job as the night manager, thought he was going to write scripts, and of course was not taunting, but like, come out and show yourself. And for a long, long time, nothing happened until something did.
Yeah.
So my point being is that if you go to some place like Skinwalker Ranch, even, the guys who were in charge there, the scientists, that were studying strange things will say like, well, look, if you go there for a week, probably nothing's going to happen. But it's the amount of very strange things and the degree of strangeness which makes places like that so significant. So here we have Pere Cheney, seems to be a regular cemetery, but as Nikki says, it's like, well, I do get a very strange feeling I can't describe, but I get that from every cemetery.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and also people were reporting kind of the classic close encounter stuff too, with car electrical problems, cars not starting.
That's also part of her stories. Yeah. It's like the radio would switch channels unexpectedly.
Yeah.
The car wouldn't start for a couple of tries. Just again, it's
and
all
that
your
gets back to
stuff.
the whole, it's a little bit of Skinwalker, but it also gets back to sort of the playful, mischievous aspect of this interaction.
Well, they are children.
Yeah, in that case,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. There's the witch evil aspect, and then there's the aspect of these kids aren't evil, they're just ghosts, I guess, if you want to chalk it up to that. But yes, plenty of, and she's not the only one. I don't want to paint it as that she's the only one who's had a strange experience and everybody else is just borrowing her stories. But in stories that describe Pere Cheney as a legend, you see those pop up again and again. And along with other people's different accounts. But yeah, it's interesting to find one story kind of thread throughout.
On the other hand, maybe it's just a sawmill town that went bust. Maybe the sawmill started a fire and that worked its way into the story of Grayling coming over and burning it to the ground and they had no water to put it out.
Yeah, right. A horde of rats coming into town and spreading disease.
Yeah, a little hard
Who
to
knows?
say. But,
Yeah, who knows on that? Probably not. But
or maybe it was a witch who was really nothing more than a woman who was cast out for something as simple as having a child out of wedlock. If she even existed at all.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
if she is going to exist, the child out of wedlock spin on that story makes it more plausible.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so like,
Yeah.
well, that's believable. People
Yeah.
just thought she was a witch. Well, we don't know if there's a woman at all.
Yeah, it's a good point. And then there's the other possibility that the town it simply failed, as some towns do.
That happened actually quite a bit. Well, as we just saw with Henry Plummer, the Bannock was the county seat.
Yeah.
The territorial seat for a while, the hot spot, the thing that's happening in the whole territory, the whole region for the Idaho territory at the time, and then for Montana. And they find gold somewhere else, Alder Gulch. People start doing more business there, hanging out there because it's hard to travel in those days. It's closer to where the action is. And then you have towns like nearby Nevada City and Virginia City, which were doing better booming business, and Bannock just dries up.
Yeah.
Now, unlike Pere Cheney, a lot of the buildings are still standing, but you could see it's just the flow of the ebb and flow of people and their activities. And with Pere Cheney, it's just like, there's no reason to be here.
Well,
there's two other great towns we can go visit and live at.
Well, and it's interesting because Quaid, who was doing research for us in the ARC about other towns, other examples, and we have a link to a story that he found several other towns. It's kind of the same thing happened. There was a town called Freedom. This was founded by African Americans. It had railroad service, but no post office. And its schoolhouse, I guess now is part of the Mackinac Heritage Village in Mackinac City, which is up in the northern part of the Mitten there. There's another town called Mintha, which was founded by peppermint grower Albert Todd.
Well, sounds refreshing.
Yes, and it's located in Van Buren County with access by the Calhaven Bicycle Trail. Only a few remnants of buildings remain there. Rossenville, this was a Wayne County hamlet, sort of like Atlantis, boomed from the 1830s to the 1860s, but disappeared underwater when Belleville Lake was flooded in 1925. And then there's another town, Glen Haven. Within the boundaries of Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore is a former logging village that is currently being restored. All of this is from the Detroit Free Press, 2014. But the point is, towns come and go all the time for pretty banal, mundane reasons. So you have to wonder if that's all that happened here, and then all this lore worked up around this story, maybe centered around the death, the focus on death from the two outbreaks of diphtheria or possibly cholera.
Right.
Or the fires, or just the idea of this thing being prosperous. And I mean, people have a fascination even today with exploring abandoned structures. And you're drawn to it. It's like the Salton Sea. You go and you want to see these things that used to be populated and now they've just shifted. And this goes all the way back to ancient civilization. I mean, archaeologists are still constantly discovering communities that usually for environmental reasons have fallen away. Even if they had been prosperous, if the river floods and or dries up, you're done at that location.
Oh, exactly. And you get swallowed up by the earth, as you say. Now, we're no anthropologists or sociologists, but what we're trying to do here, especially with this story and cemetery stories in general, is see a pattern of different elements that kind of ring true for a lot of them, that keep recurring, the elements that keep getting retold. And that's why we said Pere Cheney, if you believe all of it or not, or all of it turns out to pan out to be true or not.
If you believe any of this at all.
If you believe any of this at all, that it has a lot of the great elements of a good ghost story or haunted area, especially for a cemetery.
Well, I guess technically it's all just hearsay and tall tales, but as we like to do, we did reach out to a local man who grew up in the area and visited Pere Cheney several times as a rebellious kid. His name is Eric Liddy. He grew up in Grayling, and when he was in high school, he and a bunch of friends went out to the Pere Cheney Cemetery because they wanted to get spooked. And as we're about to hear, they may have gotten more than they bargained for.
So as you listen to this segment, keep in mind that most of the time when you go out to visit a haunted place, nothing extraordinary happens. But every once in a while, something unexplainable, terrifying, and possibly deadly can happen.
Tell us a little bit about your story, the night that you went originally when you were younger, if you don't mind recounting that.
I was in high school, but I was with the Army Reserves back then. And a buddy of mine that I knew from the area, got a hold of me and was like, hey, man, we're going to go out to this old cemetery. And I'm like, oh, cool, man, let's go check it out. So somewhere along the way, we wound up picking up, probably 10 more people in the bed of his pickup truck, plus another carload.
Oh, geez.
So I think altogether there was like 25 people altogether crammed into 2 different vehicles. So we went out there. A few of them were drinking. It was one of the nights I wasn't. I did later after I got back. I was like, what the hell happened out there? But we were out there probably about 10 o'clock at night, 10:30, somewhere in there. And we were just out checking out the headstones and stuff. And a lot of the girls and the women that were with us got all freaked out and scared and everything, you know, while we were out there. I mean, it was pretty creepy being out there. And someone said they spotted red eyes in the woods. And that's when everything went to hell in a handbasket. Everyone started piling back into vehicles, freaking out. We bolted. There was at least probably 10 or 12 of them that actually said they saw the eyes.
Oh, wow.
They were following us through the woods as we made our way back down the trail and across the railroad tracks.
Wow. Okay.
So I didn't see it per se because I was too busy being clawed to death by one of our other friends who she was on crutches, and I had to actually help load her into the back of the pickup truck. And I piled in after her, and she grabbed me and yanked me down to the bed of the truck, and I'm like, what up? You know, she was basically making me hold on to her.
Yeah.
Because she was so scared. And she was one of the people that saw it. I can't remember the names of everyone that was there that night. It's been so long ago. But my buddy that was driving the pickup truck, his name was Leroy. But we went back probably a couple weeks later. And my buddy Leroy decided that he was going to take the top half of the quote-unquote witch's tombstone. And that headstone had, probably a 4 to 6 inch wide and long piece of plate glass in it, rather thick. It's probably old lead glass on both sides of the headstone.
Oh, that's interesting.
And from what I understand now, I mean, we didn't know back then, we were young. What I understand now is the family had her cremated and placed inside of that headstone.
Okay. So there was an urn or something in behind the glass, maybe?
I mean, the headstone was thick enough that it could have held that, but no, they actually had placed the ashes inside of the headstone itself. It was like notched out, and then the glass was sealed in.
Oh, okay. So it was just there.
The ashes in.
And you could see the ashes.
You could see ash from either side, right, from either side of the headstone.
Wow, that's crazy.
And the glass was probably at least a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. It was some pretty thick stuff. But as the story goes, apparently about 6 or 7 years prior to that, 2 young boys were out there playing in the cemetery, and they were near the headstone. And this was actually, there's a book about Pere Cheney in the Grayling or Crawford County Library, but there in Grayling, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And both boys were playing around the headstone, and the glass exploded, cutting both of them. I mean, they had minor injuries and stuff. I don't know to the extent if they needed stitches or anything, but I do remember when I saw the headstone, at least half of the glass was still there.
Was the implication that they were vandalizing it, and that's how it broke, or did it just spontaneously broke?
Allegedly, it spontaneously broke, whether it was they were vandalizing it or not. They were 2 younger kids. They were probably 8 or 10 years old.
Right.
You know, back then, I know 60s and 70s, people respected places of rest a lot more than they would now.
Yeah. So how did you guys identify, or how did it come out that that necessarily was the witch's headstone?
It was well known that that was the quote-unquote witch's headstone.
Okay.
You know, legend and rumor had it that she was burned at the stake and they put her ashes there. The only problem I see with that is she was buried, if I remember right, late 1800s.
Right.
You know, her ashes were interned there. So, yeah, that's the only problem I have with that aspect of the story. But allegedly, most of the people that we discovered, there's entire families and all these kids and stuff that were buried there within days or weeks of each other.
Yeah, they had 2 diphtheria outbreaks.
Diphtheria and cholera.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yep. And of course, you know, back then, this was before I began studying medicine and everything else. We didn't know why. We just figured the entire town was cursed. But of course, back then, you're looking at poor hygienic conditions and lack of running water and a lot of other things, and it just wiped entire families right out.
Right.
Unfortunately. So there's a lot of infants and young children buried in there too.
Sure.
It is definitely a creepy place to be at night. The first night we went, there was a full moon out there, and that's kind of why we went. We were there maybe an hour, and within that hour, it had clouded over.
Uh-huh.
Which was kind of creepy. We weren't expecting any crappy weather or anything.
Yeah, sure. So what about the story with the headstone in the car that happened later?
Okay. A couple weeks later, we went back. My buddy Leroy thought that it'd be funny to take the top half of the headstone because it was already crumbling and falling apart. It wasn't broken or anything. It was just falling off. So he took it and he put it underneath the front driver's seat of the car. And it sat there for a couple months. That winter, myself, my friend Leroy, and 2 other friends, we were on our way back to his house. We had been out somewhere or other. I can't remember where we were. And it was like a freak snowstorm popped up. It wasn't supposed to snow that night or anything. And it was just like in the general vicinity where we were. And I remember Leroy commenting, where the hell is all this snow coming from? And we were like, I don't know, because there's clear skies everywhere else. It was just dumping snow right in that area. And he lost control of the car. We were doing 55 miles an hour, and he slid off the road and hit a very large oak tree head on. Ooh. The woman that was in the front seat, she was 5 months pregnant, 4 or 5 months pregnant. She ended up being a human airbag for Leroy. So he was uninjured, but she fractured her sternum and several ribs. I fractured both of my kneecaps. The guy that was sitting next to me in the back passenger seat, and I was the only one that had seatbelt on.
Oh, my gosh.
Had a lap belt on.
What kind of car was it?
Yeah. Oh, man, it was...
Forrest is saying you'd written that it was somewhere, that it was a Chrysler Newport, maybe?
Yeah, it was an older Chrysler, I think Newport.
Yeah.
It was old. I mean, it was a muscle car, basically.
Okay.
The front end of the car was just absolutely demolished. I couldn't even walk when I got out of the car. I tried to step out and I collapsed because my knees were jacked up, and three of us went by ambulance, and of course Leroy was unhurt. My buddy that was sitting next to me had I couldn't even tell you how many stitches in his leg. He was laid wide open. We don't know where he got cut. Well, we all got to the hospital. The next day I went over to his house to see the car because they had it towed back to his house. He wanted to restore it. So when I walked up, to the car, I was on crutches. I looked down and I was like, hey, Leroy, was that headstone sitting there, last night? And he's like, I don't know. And apparently from the crash, it had slid out from underneath the seat, and it was pretty secure under the seat.
Uh-huh.
He didn't slide his seat forward or back or anything. And with it being an older car, you wouldn't have thought it wouldn't have jumped the bar or anything, but it did, and it was actually pressed against the accelerator and the brake pedal.
Uh-huh.
And we kind of both looked at each other like, oh, crap. And we made the decision at that point, once the woman that was with us was out of the hospital and my buddy were all together, we would take it back. And we did. We put it right back where we got it from. We set it right back on the bottom half of the headstone.
Okay. Wow. Did the pregnancy have any complications, or did that worked out for her okay after that accident?
Yeah, it was chest trauma. There was no abdominal trauma, thankfully.
Oh, good.
Ultrasounds and everything came back clear, which was good.
Oh, that's great.
But 3 out of the 4 of us that were in the car were injured out of the deal. And we thought it was kind of a little freaky and probably a bit ironic that that headstone was sitting right there. And, we went back and, so to speak, made our peace by putting it back.
Wow.
And, it was a pretty creepy deal. I mean, the other 2 that were with us, when they found out about that, because, they were with us when it was removed.
Right.
So we took it back and put it in place. And we did that in broad daylight.
Yeah, I bet. Were there any dates? Do you remember any dates being on that headstone? Is that why you were saying that you thought if the year was off, because it seemed more recent than the 1800s?
Yeah. It was more recent than 16s or 1700s. It was 1800s because the town began in the early 1800s, if I remember correctly,
yes,
for logging and whatnot. So I want to say it was in the 1880s.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There are people buried there from the early 1900s. I can't remember when the last residents moved out. It was in the early 1900s. I know that.
Uh-huh.
All that's left of the town are stone bases. A lot of it's overgrown and stuff. I'm not sure what happened with the dwellings themselves, if they just crumbled or people tore them down or what happened.
And one last question on the Newport, just because I'm curious, because I'm kind of a motorhead. So was that a 2-door or a 4-door?
No, that was a 4-door.
Yeah, because it came both ways. I was just curious.
Wait a minute, I'm trying to think here. Now you got me thinking again.
Yeah.
No, that was a 4-door.
Okay, yeah.
It was a 4-door.
Right, so it's a tank.
I slid out the pit.
It's a big car, right?
Yeah. It was a land bar.
Yeah.
It was like my old 76 Impala.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
His was, I think, a 70 or something like that. 70 or 69. It was an older car.
And what you were talking about, just to clarify, under the seat there, the frame, there's a crossbar, right? So what you're saying is that the headstone, which you had said in your article that you thought it was as much as 80 pounds, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That thing weighed a ton.
So you're saying
it took two of us to put it in the car.
Right.
Safely.
Right. And so you're saying it was in a little well. It was in that well under the seat there, and somehow it had jumped out onto the pedals.
Absolutely. And there was no damage to it. I mean, there was nothing from the interior of the car cracked it or damaged it or anything. It was intact, just the way we placed it under there.
Right.
Because we had to open the back door and slide it up and over.
Right. Okay. That's great. Well, this is a great story, man. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. After you guys took it back, any more unusual events or problems for anybody?
Not per se for myself. I've lost contact with the other 3 individuals that were involved. I had left for the military later on, went active duty from reserve status.
Uh-huh.
And after I got out of the military, I went back to southern Michigan. I'm from the Detroit area originally. And from that point, I hired on to my first fire department and worked from 1988 until just about 2 years ago here in fire service EMS. Just retired, went back to trucking.
Wow. That's it.
So I was just back up there a few years ago, just checking things out, and it looks nothing like it did back in the 80s.
Oh, really? What's different?
A lot of headstones are missing. Obviously, there was other people that were destroying property and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still headstones there, and I know the Historical Society and some other groups up in the area are looking to restore those headstones and or replace them. So
yeah, sure.
And the last time I was up there, apparently the night before, somebody pulled up in a pickup truck or a car or something or other and opened fire on some other people that were there with a shotgun.
That was the night before you went?
Yeah.
Was that 2009?
Yeah, it sure was.
Because we heard that story somewhere else about people getting shot at. So you were there the next day.
Yeah, I was there the very next day. My brother and my mom, stepdad, and my youngest sister live up there, and my nephew too, and sister-in-law. My brother actually called me when I was on my way up there and gave me the heads up, and I caught word of it from the local paper. It made the paper too, and local television news, if I remember correctly.
Was this in Grayling?
Yeah, Pere Cheney is just south of Grayling. It's not even marked on a map anymore. The only way that you can get there or find it is by GPS, and it's by GPS only because they're trying to keep vandals out of the place.
Right, sure.
It seems as though the cemetery is fairly decimated.
Yeah, that's the sad thing, right? It's been severely vandalized, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I know kids still go out there to this day. You know, I get goosebumps even thinking about the place, but
yeah,
they still go out there for a thrill and, you know, because of the legends, and where the legends originated, I don't know. Allegedly, there used to be a shack there near the cemetery. And of course, you know, allegedly a Native American used to oversee it and somebody killed him. I don't know if there's any truth, even a speck of truth to that legend. So it's hard to say. I mean, I kind of like going into old places like that and checking them out. And there's some nostalgia there and history, obviously. But of course, I'm almost 50 now.
Yeah. So do you remember a name, a first or last name or anything on that headstone?
To save my life, I don't remember what the woman's name was.
Right, okay.
I know the headstone was fairly worn, as most of the older ones that are there. I mean, I still wonder who may have taken the remainder of the headstone. All that's there is the base.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And that was a pretty sizable headstone. Like I said, it was probably 3 to 4 foot tall and probably at least 2 to 2.5 feet wide.
Wow.
And probably about 4 to 5 inches thick. It was a pretty sizable piece of stone.
Yeah. So what about the story of the ghost train? Do you know anything about that?
Allegedly, if you're out there around midnight, you can hear a train whistle, and some people have reported seeing the headlamp of an old locomotive that used to run through there.
Wow. Okay.
If you're out on the tracks, either by foot or crossing the tracks around that time, around midnight or shortly thereafter, is when you can hear it and see it.
Well, that's going to wrap up tonight's show on Pere Cheney, Michigan. Special thanks to Linda Godfrey, Debbie Chestnut, and Eric Liddy Sr. We'll be back next week with Mothman screenwriter Richard Haddam. You told him, right?
No, I'm hoping that he's going to listen to tonight's show.
Man. Special thanks to John Boland.
Hi, I love your show. This is Allison Bentley.
Hi, I'm Lynn Ashley.
Hi, I'm Jordana.
And I give permission
To Astonishing Legends to use my voice
However they see fit.
galaxy-wide in
Galaxy-wide
perpetuity.
Galaxy-wide in perpetuity.
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees, and the theme is by Judson Crane.
Sound design is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the ARC and its lead researcher, Tess Feifel.
But most importantly, we want to thank our listeners. You can find us online at astonishinglegends.com, as well as Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, Tumblr, Google+, and Instagram.
Copyright Scott Philbrook
and Forrest Burgess. Good night.